I've always been fascinated by snake charmers. Maybe it's because, when I was 6, they looked like magicians, men who could control death with nothing but a flute. I loved the way the snakes moved. Their scales shimmered in the sun, glinting like 1,000 tiny diamonds as they danced to the haunting melody of their masters' flutes. In the daylight, they looked almost beautiful, but as the sun began to set, their appearance changed. The orange rays painted their bodies in shades of fire, and they began to look sinister, like spirits rising from the flames, ready to strike at any moment. And their eyes, those glowing, unblinking eyes, always locked on the charmer, waiting, watching, calculating. Every time I saw them, I thought, "This is it. The snake's going to strike." But it never did. Even now, decades later, I still wonder why. Were they trained? Defanged? Or was there something darker at work? Something beyond the music? 70 years ago, when I was just a boy, India was still under British rule. My village was small, but our Gora Sahib, the British officer, was kind. He had an Indian wife, spoke our language, and treated my father, the village head, with genuine respect. I remember his tall hat, his calm voice, and the sweet smell of tobacco that always lingered around him. He liked me too, often saying I was bright and should study at the new school, maybe even in England one day. He once showed me photographs of London, streets full of cars, bridges of steel, and buildings that kissed the clouds. To my young mind, it was paradise. I dreamed of it often, never once doubting the goodness of our British friends. Only the village fool, Rangappa, ever disagreed. He spoke of a man named Gandhi and whispered that the British didn't belong here. I laughed at him then. Foolish words, I thought. Why would anyone want to drive out such wonderful people? When the Gora Sahib announced the first grand carnival in our village, excitement swept through every home. He said it would be a celebration of both Indian and British culture, a chance for everyone to come together. For 2 days, our little village would become a sea of lights, color, and music. My father allowed me to go, but only if I promised to stay close to my elder brother. Of course, that promise lasted only a few minutes. My brother soon vanished into the crowd with his friends, bribing me with a few coins and a promise of mangoes when we got home. Left alone, I wandered through a world of wonders. Everywhere I looked, the carnival glittered with life. There were dancers spinning in bright saris, British soldiers laughing with painted clowns, and musicians playing strange instruments that echoed across the night. But what caught my attention first was, once again, a snake charmer. The serpent rose from its basket like a shadow come to life, its hood flared wide, its eyes gleaming crimson in the torchlight. The flames made its scales shimmer like liquid metal. I was hypnotized by its movements, by the way it swayed as if under a spell. For a moment I felt like the whole world was still. Just me, the charmer, and his deadly companion. Then a sudden shout made me jump. The crowd gasped as a man stepped barefoot into a bed of burning coals. My heart pounded as he walked calmly through the fire, his skin untouched by the flames. When he reached the other side, the audience erupted in cheers, and I clapped so hard my palms stung. Everywhere around me, the carnival roared with life. There were dancers, a juggler tossing flaming torches, and even a massive oil painting of the English Queen, her gaze following me no matter where I stood. It was a dream come true. And then, without warning, there was an explosion. A loud, sharp boom that shook the air and sent everyone ducking. My heart skipped a beat. I turned to run and slammed into what I thought was a wall, but the wall said, "Ouch!" I looked up and froze. It wasn't a wall, it was a man, a giant of a man, towering over me like a mountain. His face was pale and scarred, his eyes dark and cruel. Before I could apologize, he grabbed me by the collar and lifted me off the ground. "Watch where you're going, you filthy vermin," he growled, his breath hot and bitter. "Next time I see you, I'll send you back to your mother crippled." Then he dropped me, hard. My back hit the dirt and tears stung my eyes. As I looked up, he bent down to pick something off the ground. It glinted in the firelight. Silver, sharp, unmistakably a dagger. Any sane person would have run. But I was 6 years old, and curiosity is a dangerous thing at that age. So instead of fleeing, I followed him. The giant moved through the crowd like a dark ghost, his dagger catching the light every few steps. He stopped at a large tent at the far end of the carnival and ducked inside. From where I stood, I could hear angry voices, 8 or 9 men shouting at one. My heart raced. I crept closer and lifted the edge of the curtain to see. Inside, the lone man stood defiantly, facing the brute who had threatened me. His voice was trembling with fury. The giant said something I couldn't hear, and then lunged forward. The dagger flashed once. The man gasped, a sound sharp enough to pierce the night, and blood gushed from his stomach, dark and thick. He fell to his knees, and the others closed in, stabbing again and again. The sound of metal slicing flesh filled the tent. Their faces were calm, expressionless, like men performing a sacred ritual. Every head turned toward me. I felt my world tilt. The torches blurred, the ground swayed beneath me. And then I screamed. Even the dying man's eyes found mine, wide, desperate, full of disbelief. The brute took a step forward, the dagger dripping red, his gaze burning into me. My body moved before my mind could think. I turned and ran. The carnival had transformed into a nightmare. The clown's painted grin twisted into madness. The dancers' faces blurred into ghostly smears of red. The snake charmer's serpent now looked monstrous, its eyes glowing blood red as if alive with hunger. Everywhere I turned, faces warped, voices echoed, laughter turned to screams. I ran until my lungs burned, until the music and fire blurred together. Somehow, I reached my father's tent and collapsed into his lap, shaking uncontrollably. My father held me close until my sobs faded. Then, between gasps, I told him everything: the giant, the dagger, the men, the blood. He didn't interrupt once. His face was calm, but his eyes were sharp and cold. When I finally finished, a calm voice came from behind us. "I think your son is telling the truth," it said. "Yes," my father replied quietly. "So do I." Within minutes, they gathered 20 men, some carrying sticks, others rifles, and set off toward the tent, taking me with them to lead the way. When we arrived, my father told me to wait outside. I stood there trembling as they disappeared inside. For a few moments I heard shouting, then the sharp crack of a gunshot, and then silence. The tent flap moved, and Rangappa, the village fool, stepped out. His face was blank, unreadable. He walked toward me, knelt down, and smiled softly. "Little one," he said, his voice calm. "What you saw in there was just a rehearsal, a play. Julius Caesar, being stabbed by his own men." He chuckled and walked away, leaving me speechless. That night, I didn't sleep. The image of the man's terrified eyes haunted me. The blood looked too real, the fear too genuine. Even now, 70 years later, I still wonder, was it really a play? Or did I witness something far more sinister, something they never wanted anyone to know?